I need a fountain, I told the guy on the phone, a man named Tony. Okay, Tony said, sounding bored. What kind of fountain? The biggest one you've got, I said. The most extravagant, the most unnecessary. There was a pause. Unnecessary? Think Bellagio, I said. Think Dubai. Think water-powered world domination. Tony chuckled. Okay, you've got my attention. What's the occasion? Revenge, I said simply. And the music? Tony asked. Classical, I said. Something dramatic. Ride of the Valkyries. O Fortuna, you know, the classics. You're a madman, Tony said, laughing. I love it. I'm David, and I'm a pond enthusiast. Okay, maybe enthusiast is strong. I just really like my koi pond. It's small, tucked in a corner of my yard. A little kidney-shaped haven with a bubbling fountain. 4 fish, Finnegan, bubbles, sushi, and, yes, koi. Creative, I know. It's my peaceful spot in Silver Creek, our perfectly pleasant, perfectly HOA-controlled neighborhood. The pond? It had been there for years, no complaints. Until she returned. David? News, Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor and Silver Creek's resident gossip oracle, hissed over the fence. Her eyes were wide. Karen Whitmore? I guessed, already feeling a knot in my stomach. Back, she confirmed, with the gravity of a town crier announcing the plague. HOA president. Again. Karen. Just the name sent shivers. She'd moved away, and we'd all enjoyed a brief, blissful period of beige-free existence. Now, the pink slip arrived that afternoon. HOA violation notice, naturally. Water features must not be excessive or disruptive. I read aloud, incredulous. Remove fountain. 14 days. Excessive? Disruptive? It's a bubbler, for crying out loud. It makes less noise than Mrs. Peterson's wind chimes. My initial amusement evaporated, replaced by a slow-burning annoyance. This wasn't just about a fountain. It was about control. Her control. And that wasn't going to happen. Community aesthetic? What did that even mean? The HOA meeting. Beige room, beige souls. The usual suspects on the board, Mr. Bored Out of His Mind, Mrs. Perpetual Knitter, and a couple of others I'd mentally dubbed the Apathy Crew. And then Karen. She hadn't changed. Power suit, beige naturally. Hair like a helmet, that same condescending smirk. She looked like she'd been marinating in HOA regulations. Mr. Miller's water feature, she announced, the word dripping with disdain. It's a pond, Karen, I corrected, keeping my voice even. Small pond, with fish. Too loud, she declared. Louder than my fountain, I guarantee it. It's a bubbler, Karen, I repeated, fighting to stay calm. It's soothing. Unwanted attention, she countered. What attention? Were the squirrels complaining? It looks, she added with a dramatic shudder, like something from a theme park. A theme park? Seriously? My little kidney-shaped pond? I almost laughed. Other houses have bird baths, I pointed out. What's the difference? Bird baths are tasteful, she snapped. The implication being, of course, that my pond was the aquatic equivalent of a clown car. I checked the bylaws, I said, trying a different tactic. Nothing specifically bans small fountains. Karen smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. There may not be a specific rule, Mr. Miller, but I don't like it. Gavel slam. Removed, she declared, with the finality of a judge sentencing someone to death by beige paint. Fine. Game on, Karen. Game on. Okay, Karen, challenge accepted. I wasn't going down without a fight. That evening, I became best friends with the HOA bylaws and local ordinances. My weapon of choice? Legal loopholes. My battleground? Clause 18, Section B, subsection, or whatever. I was determined to find something, anything, to defend my aquatic rights. I mean, it was a pond, for crying out loud. A small, peaceful, fish-containing pond. But Karen? She acted like I'd installed a nuclear reactor in my front yard. The woman was intense. A little voice in my head whispered, "Maybe just let it go, David. It's just a fountain." But then I pictured Karen's smug face, and that voice was drowned out by a chorus of righteous indignation. I considered other options. A smaller, less offensive water feature. A bird bath. A strategically placed garden hose. No. Those were acts of surrender. I needed a statement, a declaration, well, I didn't know what I needed yet, but it definitely wasn't a bird bath. The next morning I woke up to silence. An unsettling silence. My little fountain usually provided a gentle, gurgling soundtrack to my mornings. Its absence was wrong. I walked outside, and my heart sank. My pond. It was gone. What the? I stared at the empty, muddy hole where my peaceful oasis had once been. The water was drained. The rocks were scattered. The pump smashed. And the fish gone. "Finnegan, Bubbles!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Sushi, koi!" Nothing. Just the faint, mocking echo of my own despair. Then I saw it. A note, taped to a rock, weighted down with... Was that a piece of broken fountain? "HOA compliant now. You're welcome. KW." And because Karen apparently lacked any sense of subtlety, or decency, she'd drawn a little thing next to her initials. It was supposed to be a water droplet, I think, but it looked more like a lopsided teardrop. Fitting. "You took my fish?" I roared at the empty yard. You pond murderer!" This wasn't just vandalism, it was aquatic assault. This was personal. They hadn't just drained my pond. They'd stolen my pets, my finned friends, my... I needed to find them. And Karen? She was going to pay. Security camera time. I had cameras. Of course I had cameras. This was Silver Creek, after all. The footage. 2:14 a.m. Karen, in black leggings and a hoodie, seriously leading the charge. Her accomplices. Mr. Henderson, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and Mrs. Gable, surprisingly spry for her age, wielding a garden trowel like a weapon. Operation Dry Pond, I muttered, narrating the scene. Starring Karen Whitmore as the Beige Bandit. Tutum. They worked with a disturbing efficiency. Henderson drained the pond with a bucket. Slowly, painfully. Mrs. Gable attacked the pump with her trowel. Surprisingly effective. And Karen? She was directing the whole operation, pointing and gesturing like a deranged orchestra conductor. Then the fish. Karen, with a net she'd clearly brought for the occasion, scooped up my poor koi and dumped them into a plastic bag. A plastic bag. "Finnegan!" I yelled at the screen. "No!" And because this whole thing couldn't get any more ridiculous, Henderson, after the pond was empty, gave a triumphant thumbs up to the camera. "You just signed your own warrant, Henderson," I growled. The anger wasn't just simmering anymore. It was boiling. It was a rolling boil of fury, seasoned with a dash of betrayal, and a whole lot of, "Oh, hell no." And in that moment, amidst the digital carnage, a plan was born. A beautiful, glorious, ridiculously over-the-top plan. Back to the bylaws. I needed a weapon. And there it was. Rule #18A, landscaping and outdoor features. The key phrase, water features must be well integrated into the home's aesthetic. No restrictions on size, no mention of fountains specifically, just well integrated. Well integrated, I muttered, a slow, evil grin spreading across my face. Oh, I'll show you well integrated. The idea hit me like a tidal wave. A fountain show. A massive, computer-controlled Las Vegas-style fountain show. Right there, in my front yard. I found a company online, Aquatic Extravaganzas. Perfect, I called. I need a fountain, I told the guy on the phone, a man named Tony. Okay, Tony said, sounding bored. What kind of fountain? The biggest one you've got, I said. The most extravagant. The most unnecessary. There was a pause. Unnecessary? Think Bellagio, I said. Think Dubai. Think water-powered world domination. Tony chuckled. Okay, you've got my attention. What's the occasion? Revenge, I said simply. We talked details. Programmable water jets, synchronized to music. LED lights capable of displaying every color of the rainbow. Mist effects. Multiple tiers. Cascading water. The works. And the music? Tony asked. Classical, I said. Something dramatic. Ride of the Valkyries. O Fortuna, you know, the classics. You're a madman, Tony said, laughing. I love it. One last detail. I want a nightly show that starts automatically at 9 p.m. The formal notice to the HOA was short and sweet. Reimbursement for the pond. Reimbursement for the fish, which, thankfully, I'd located at a local pet store. Karen had apparently dumped them there. And a veiled threat about enhancing my landscaping. Let the games begin. Installation day was an event. It was less landscaping and more major construction project. Trucks arrived, carrying enormous pumps, pipes, nozzles, and enough LED lights to illuminate a small city. A backhoe dug up my entire front yard, transforming it into a muddy crater. Neighbors gathered, their expressions a mixture of awe, confusion, and a healthy dose of, what in the world is that crazy man doing now? I, of course, was in my element. I supervised the operation with the intensity of a seasoned general, directing the placement of each jet, overseeing the wiring of each light, and ensuring that the whole thing was, as the bylaws stated, well integrated into my home's aesthetic, which at this point was rapidly shifting from suburban chic to Vegas Strip spectacular. I was excited. I was anticipating. I was also, admittedly, a little nervous. What if it was too much? What if I'd gone too far? What if I'd created a watery monstrosity that would haunt my dreams and my neighbors' dreams for years to come? But then I pictured Karen's face, and all doubts vanished. This was going to be glorious. By dusk, the transformation was complete. My front yard was no longer a yard. It was a stage. A massive, multi-tiered fountain, complete with dozens of programmable jets, hundreds of color-changing LEDs, and a misting system that created an ethereal, otherworldly glow. It was breathtaking. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. And, right on cue, Karen arrived. Her car screeched to a halt in front of my house, the sound echoing through the otherwise quiet evening. She stormed out, her face already a mask of incandescent fury, even before she'd fully processed the spectacle before her. "What?" she roared, her voice cracking with rage. "Is this?" I emerged from my house, strolling casually towards her, a picture of serene composure. "Good evening, Karen," I said, my voice calm and even. "You're referring, I presume, to my new water feature?" "You turned your front yard into the Bellagio!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the colossal fountain. "The Bellagio!" No, I corrected, shaking my head. "It's a residential water display. HOA compliant, of course. Rule 18A, remember? Well integrated. And I must say, I think it integrates beautifully with my home's new aesthetic." This is insanity," she sputtered, her face turning a shade of purple I'd previously only seen on eggplants. "Would you like to see it in action?" I offered, pulling out my phone. "I've got it all programmed." Before Karen could answer, or more likely, explode, I tapped the screen. The fountain roared to life. Jets of water shot skyward, dancing and swirling in a perfectly choreographed ballet. LED lights shifted through a rainbow of colors, illuminating the cascading water and the surrounding mist. And then the music started. A powerful, soaring rendition of O Fortuna. It was magnificent. It was over the top. It was everything I'd hoped for. Karen stared, speechless, her mouth agape. She looked like a cartoon character who'd just been hit with a giant mallet. "I have other settings too," I said helpfully. "There's classical calm, patriotic power, and my personal favorite, Disco Inferno." This will not stand," she finally managed to choke out, her voice hoarse. "I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting right now." She turned and stomped back to her car, leaving a trail of sputtering outrage in her wake. The emergency HOA meeting was, predictably, a masterpiece of chaos. Karen, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past few hours, launched into a furious tirade, accusing me of everything from violating noise ordinances to wasting precious water resources to creating a public nuisance of epic proportions. "It's a fountain show," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the beige room. "In our neighborhood. It's unthinkable." "Actually," I said calmly, addressing the board, "it's entirely thinkable. And more importantly, it's legal." I presented my case. Rule 18. A. The city permits. The engineering reports, and of course the police report detailing Karen's vandalism of my original pond. Furthermore, I added, the system is incredibly eco-friendly. It recycles the water, minimizing waste, and the LED lights are highly energy efficient. The other board members, who had initially seemed ready to support Karen, were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They looked at the evidence, they looked at Karen's increasingly unhinged demeanor, and they looked at the growing crowd of reporters gathered outside. Martha, bless her gossipy heart, had clearly been busy. Even Mrs. Gable, one of Karen's accomplices in the pond destruction, was looking at me with a flicker of... Was that admiration? "I think," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "it's rather festive." And then, as if on cue, a representative from the city's water department arrived. He'd been sent to investigate Karen's complaints. "I've reviewed Mr. Miller's water usage," he announced to the board. "His system is fully compliant with all city regulations. In fact, it's one of the most efficient residential water features I've ever seen." Karen's face crumpled. It was over. The meeting ended in a complete rout. Karen's motion to ban the fountain show was defeated, unanimously. The board, terrified of lawsuits and public humiliation, voted to take no action. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The local news, predictably, had a field day. "HOA tries to kill a fountain, ends up with a Vegas-style show instead," read the headline. The article included a picture of my house, the fountain show blazing in all its glory, and a rather unflattering screenshot of Karen from the security camera footage, wielding the bucket. Karen was investigated for the vandalism. She was fined, forced to pay for my original pond and the fish, and removed from the HOA board in disgrace. A few weeks later, a "for sale" sign appeared in front of her house. She moved away, presumably to a community with even stricter rules about landscaping, where she could perhaps find solace in the beige monotony she so desperately craved. As for me, my fountain show remains. It's a neighborhood attraction, a symbol of defiance, and a constant source of amusement. And every night, at 9 p.m. sharp, as the water jets dance and the lights shimmer and O Fortuna blasts through the speakers, I can't help but smile. Because sometimes, the best way to fight back against absurdity is with even greater absurdity. And yes, other neighbors followed suit with different types of fountains. It's been a year since the fountain fiasco, as it's now known throughout Silver Creek, and thanks to the internet, beyond. And honestly, it's been the best year of my suburban life. My front yard, once a source of HOA-induced anxiety, is now a source of pride, amusement, and a surprising amount of tourist traffic. People actually drive by just to see the fountain show. I've seen families taking pictures, kids dancing to the music, and even a few marriage proposals. Apparently, synchronized water jets and dramatic classical music are surprisingly romantic. The fountain show itself has become a neighborhood institution. I've programmed special displays for every occasion. Halloween features spooky music, flashing red and orange lights, and jets that shoot water in the shape of bats. It's cooler than it sounds. Christmas is a winter wonderland of white and blue lights, snowflakes projected onto the house, and a grand finale set to the Hallelujah chorus. For the 4th of July, well, let's just say it involves red, white, and blue water, patriotic music, and a lot of mist. My brief stint as an internet celebrity was interesting. The Fountain Avenger, they called me. I did a few interviews, got quoted in some articles about HOA battles gone wild, and even received a few offers to design custom fountain shows for other people, which I politely declined. One neighborhood's amusement is another neighborhood's nightmare. But the spotlight faded, and I'm back to being just David, the guy with the epic fountain. A new family moved into Karen's old house a few months ago. The new neighbor, a young guy named Mike, stopped by one evening while I was tinkering with the fountain's control panel. "So," Mike said, gesturing towards the towering water display with a slightly awestruck expression, "why does your front yard look like the Bellagio fountains?" I grinned, adjusting the height of a particularly ambitious water jet. "Oh," I said casually, "just an HOA misunderstanding." Mike blinked. "A misunderstanding?" "Yeah," I said, nodding. "Long story. Involves a koi pond, a very determined HOA president, and a loophole in the bylaws. Let's just say things escalated." Mike chuckled, shaking his head. "Well," he said, "I guess I'll have to be careful what I do with my landscaping." "Just stick to the rules," I advised, with a wink. "And if you need any help interpreting them, I'm your guy. Or if you are looking for any ideas." And as I stood there, bathed in the colorful glow of my ridiculously extravagant fountain show, with the strains of Ride of the Valkyries filling the night air, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Karen Whitmore was gone. The HOA was relatively subdued. And I, David, the accidental aquatic revolutionary, had won. I'd fought for my right to have a water feature, and I'd ended up with a neighborhood landmark. Not bad for a guy who just wanted a peaceful place for his fish. Of course, the battle is never truly over. There's always another rule, another regulation, another potential HOA conflict lurking around the corner. But I'm ready. I've got my fountain, I've got my bylaws, and I've got a growing collection of ideas for future landscaping enhancements. Maybe I'll add lasers next, or a synchronized drone show. Or perhaps I'll finally build that moat I've always dreamed of, filled with, of course, HOA-compliant, aesthetically appropriate, non-disruptive water. The possibilities are endless, and as long as there are HOAs, there will always be a need for a little bit of creative interpretation.